You're standing at the base of the Alps. The air is sharp, the kind that cuts through every layer of clothing. Above you, the peaks rise like jagged teeth into a pale, unforgiving sky. It's beautiful, breathtaking, even, but there's something about these mountains that has always felt haunted. And on one particular morning, 20 years after a young couple vanished here, the Alps gave up one of their secrets. It started with an avalanche. A wall of snow and ice came crashing down, the kind that roars like a freight train and leaves nothing untouched. When the rescue teams arrived to assess the damage, they weren't expecting to find anything unusual. But buried deep in the snowpack, frozen, preserved almost perfectly, was a piece of climbing rope. And attached to that rope was a body. At first, investigators thought it was just another tragic recovery, one of many from decades of mountaineering accidents. But then they found the second body just meters away. A man and a woman, both in their early 30s, locked in time like an unfinished story. And then came the discovery that changed everything. In the snow beside them, trapped in a waterproof pouch, was a climbing journal, its pages intact. And what was written inside? Not just a record of a climb, not just a log of weather and elevation, but a series of frantic, terrified entries. We're not alone on this mountain. I can see him watching us. If anything happens, this is not an accident. The handwriting stops abruptly after that. For 2 decades, no one had answers. The couple's disappearance was treated as a tragic accident. Their families mourned. The case was closed. But now, with one avalanche, the Alps had just reopened a mystery that would unravel everything investigators thought they knew. Who was the him mentioned in the journal? How did 2 experienced climbers, athletes in their prime, vanish on a route they had trained for their entire lives? And why, after 20 years, does the evidence suggest they didn't just fall victim to the mountain, but to something far darker? As investigators dug deeper into the ice, they found more than just bodies. The climbing rope between them was cut, not frayed, not broken, cut cleanly, deliberately by something sharp. And if that was true, then someone was up there with them, someone who wanted them gone. This is the story of Anna Keller and Markus Vogel, 2 climbers who should have conquered the Alps, 2 families who spent 20 years searching for answers, and a discovery that left everyone asking the same haunting question: what really happened on that mountain? Because if the journal is right, their killer may have walked away from the summit that day. And for 20 years, no one even knew to look. Stay with me, because by the time we reach the summit of this story, you'll see why this case isn't just another mountain tragedy. It's a cold case buried in snow and silence. Until now, before the headlines, before the mystery, there was Anna Keller and Markus Vogel, 2 people who shared one thing that would define their lives: the mountains. Anna was born in Innsbruck, Austria. Her father was a ski instructor, her mother a nurse, and from the time she could walk, Anna seemed drawn to the peaks towering over their small alpine town. Her childhood photos tell the story: tiny boots, oversized jacket, and a grin wider than the horizon. By the time she was 12, she was scaling cliffs that made most adults freeze. Markus came from Munich, Germany. His father, a machinist, didn't understand his son's obsession with climbing. But Markus had something most climbers didn't: an engineer's mind. He was methodical, precise, and unshakably calm even in moments that would terrify others. His friends used to joke that Markus didn't climb mountains, he solved them. And when Anna met Markus at a mountaineering seminar in Chamonix, it was instant. Not love at first sight, no. Something deeper. A shared language. They didn't flirt, one friend later recalled. They compared climbing gear. That's how you knew it was serious. By 2001, Anna and Markus were inseparable. They traveled across Europe, tackling climbs most people only read about in books. The Dolomites, Mont Blanc, the Matterhorn. Every summit photo showed the same thing. 2 young climbers, exhausted but beaming, as if nothing else in the world existed but that moment. By their late 20s, Anna and Markus set their eyes on a single goal: the Weisshorn. It wasn't the tallest mountain in the Alps, but it was one of the deadliest. A serrated ridge of snow and rock, Known among climbers as the knife's edge, the Weisshorn didn't forgive mistakes, and Anna and Markus knew it. But that was the point. We wanted something that was ours. Anna wrote in an email to her sister just weeks before the climb. Not Everest, not the tourist routes, just one perfect mountain. They trained obsessively. Pre-dawn runs, ice climbing drills, endless practice with ropes, knots, and rescue techniques. Markus, ever the engineer, even redesigned some of their climbing gear himself, tweaking carabiners and anchor systems for maximum efficiency. To their friends, they weren't reckless. They were ready. And in July 2002, they made a pact. If they summit the Weisshorn together, Markus would propose at the top. The night before they left, Anna's parents hosted a small dinner at their home. Her father, normally stoic, hugged her twice before she left. "Bring her back to me," he told Markus. Markus just smiled. "I'll bring her back with a ring on her hand." They drove out at dawn, their old Volkswagen van packed with climbing gear, ropes, and provisions. Markus's journal from that day, recovered years later in the Avalanche, has a single line: "Clear skies, perfect conditions. We're ready." Friends saw them at the base camp 2 days later. They were laughing, taking pictures, full of energy. There was nothing to suggest what was coming. But here's the part that haunts everyone who's ever studied this case. On their last known night at base camp, another climber heard Markus say something strange. "If anyone comes up after us, don't follow our route." When asked what he meant, Markus brushed it off as a joke. But in hindsight, it doesn't feel funny at all. July 16, 2002. Anna and Markus began their climb at 3 a.m. Witnesses at base camp watched their headlamps vanish into the dark. They moved quickly, efficiently, exactly as they had trained. By 9 a.m., another group of climbers spotted them halfway up the ridge. They waved, shouted encouragement, and got a wave in return. It would be the last confirmed sighting of Anna and Markus alive. That night, base camp expected to see their headlamps return. But the mountain remained dark. By morning, there was still no sign of them. And by the third day, the rescue teams were deployed. The search for Anna and Markus was relentless. Helicopters, dogs, dozens of professional climbers scouring the mountain. They found their abandoned van. They found a small campsite at the base, tidy and undisturbed. But on the mountain itself, nothing. No rope, no gear, no footprints in the snow. It was as if the mountain had simply swallowed them whole. One rescuer put it bluntly: "We expected to find bodies, or at least something, but there was nothing. It was like they vanished into thin air." After 2 weeks, the search was called off. Their families were devastated. Anna's mother refused to pack away her daughter's climbing gear. Markus's father kept paying for his son's phone plan for another year, just in case. Officially, the case was ruled an accident. They likely fell into a crevasse. The authorities said, their bodies unrecoverable. But not everyone believed that, because of one thing no one could explain. The last entry in Anna's climbing journal, dated the night before they vanished. Markus says he saw someone near our camp today. No footprints, no sound, just there. I told him it was the wind, but I'm not so sure anymore. Time passed. The mountain kept its secret. Anna and Markus became a cautionary tale told to young climbers, experienced mountaineers who underestimated the Alps. Their families learned to live with the ache of unanswered questions. And then, on a cold morning in 2022, an avalanche tore through that same section of the Weisshorn. What it unearthed would bring the world back to that mountain, and finally reveal the truth. January 2022. For 2 decades, the Weisshorn had been silent. Then one storm changed everything. That winter was one of the worst the Alps had seen in years. Relentless snowfall, howling winds, and record-breaking temperatures. On January 17th, a massive avalanche ripped down the eastern face of the Weisshorn, obliterating a section of ice that had been untouched for decades. When the storm cleared, a rescue team from Zermatt went up to assess the damage. They expected to find debris, fallen rock, shattered ice. Instead, they found something else. At first, it looked like old climbing gear. a coil of rope frozen in the snow. But then one of the rescuers brushed off the ice, and a shape began to emerge. A human shape, two of them, preserved in the ice as if they had been frozen in time. Anna Keller and Markus Vogel. Their bodies, perfectly preserved, were found just a few hundred meters below the summit, still roped together. The discovery sent shockwaves through the climbing community. Journalists called it the most haunting recovery in mountaineering history. But the real mystery was what the investigators found next. Anna and Markus hadn't fallen into a crevasse as everyone assumed. Their bodies were upright, almost as if they had been standing when the ice sealed around them. And then there were the injuries. Markus's helmet was cracked, not from a fall, but from a blunt force impact. Anna's harness was cut clean through in one spot, as though sliced with a sharp blade. Even stranger, their climbing gear was found scattered across a small ledge nearby, arranged neatly. Not dropped, not broken, placed. It didn't look like an accident, one investigator admitted. It looked staged. When the bodies were airlifted to a lab in Bern, forensic teams began what would become one of the most painstaking investigations in alpine history. First, the timeline. The bodies were frozen almost immediately after death. Cold weather had preserved not only their features but also fragments of their clothing and equipment. Second, the rope connecting them. Forensic experts discovered something chilling. The rope had been partially burned. The burn marks were not consistent with friction from a fall. They were chemical. And then came the journals. Inside Anna's jacket pocket was her climbing journal, water-damaged but legible. Her final entry, dated the morning of their disappearance, simply read, "We're not alone on this mountain." Within days, Swiss authorities announced they were reopening the case. Detective Lucas Meyer, who had spent his career investigating high-altitude disappearances, was brought out of semi-retirement to lead the inquiry. Meyer was blunt with the press. "This is no longer just a mountaineering tragedy. We are treating this as a potential criminal case." Reporters swarmed the tiny alpine towns near the Weisshorn. Old witnesses were interviewed. Climbing experts reanalyzed the 2002 search logs. And slowly, a disturbing theory began to emerge. If Anna and Markus didn't fall, someone might have been up there with them. Rescue logs from 2002 contained one overlooked detail. On the third day of the original search, a helicopter pilot reported what he thought were faint tracks leading away from the couple's last known route. At the time, investigators dismissed it. They assumed they were old tracks from another climbing party. But with the bodies now recovered, Meyer had those photographs digitally enhanced. The result was shocking. The tracks didn't match Anna or Markus's climbing boots. They were larger, wider, and they led nowhere. They simply stopped at a rock face, as if the person had vanished into thin air. For Anna's parents, the news was devastating. After 20 years of imagining their daughter buried deep in the mountain, they were now being told she may have been murdered. Her mother wept on camera. "We waited 20 years to bury her. Now you're telling me someone might have put her there." Markus's father, however, was furious. He demanded answers. "If someone was up there with them, I want to know who. And I want to know why it's taken 20 years for the police to even look." As news of the case exploded, theories flooded the internet. The rival climber theory. Some suggested another climbing party may have confronted Anna and Markus, possibly in a dispute over their route. The stalker theory. Others pointed to Anna's journal entry about someone near our camp. Had they been followed? The hermit theory. A few locals whispered about an old legend. A man who supposedly lived high in the Alps, away from civilization. No proof, but the footprints gave the rumors life. Detective Meyer refused to speculate, but he did confirm one thing. Whoever left those footprints was never found. 3 months into the reopened investigation, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Markus's old climbing harness. Embedded in the frayed edge of the cut strap, forensic analysts found microscopic traces of metal, not from a climbing tool, from a knife, and not just any knife. The alloy matched a rare, custom-made blade sold only at one small outfitter in Zermatt. The shop's records showed only 5 of those knives had been sold in 2001, and one of those buyers was another climber who vanished from the Alps in 2004. Detective Lucas Meyer stared at the report. The knife fragment pulled from Markus's harness wasn't just a clue. It was a bombshell. Only 5 of those custom alpine knives had ever been sold in 2001. And one of the buyers, Hans Ritter, was a local climber who himself vanished in 2004 on a nearby peak. Meyer immediately ordered a background check on Ritter. What they found was chilling. Ritter was an experienced solo climber known for his extreme routes. He had a reputation for hostility toward outsiders climbing his mountains. Several climbers had accused him of sabotage, ropes tampered with, gear stolen. None of it ever stuck. And then he disappeared. No trace, no body. Was Ritter somehow involved in Anna and Markus's deaths? For weeks, investigators dug into Ritter's past. They tracked down old climbing partners. One, a retired mountaineer named Franz Berger, recalled a disturbing story. Hans hated Markus, Franz said. Said he was arrogant. Said he didn't respect the mountain. He told me once, "If the Weisshorn doesn't teach him a lesson, I will." But Franz also admitted something else. We never saw him again after '04. Some say the mountain took him. Others say, maybe he's still up there. The implication was absurd, but it planted a seed. Then came a new lead. A retired hut keeper, Greta Vogel, came forward with a memory from 2002. "Anna and Markus stopped at my hut 2 days before they vanished," she told investigators. "They weren't alone. There was a man, silent, intense. He didn't talk to anyone. He left at dawn the next morning, heading the same way they were." Greta was shown a photograph of Hans Ritter. Her hands trembled. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the man." If Greta was right, Ritter had been following them. But if Ritter died in 2004, what happened between 2002 and 2004? The media went wild. Tabloids dubbed Ritter the ghost of the Weisshorn. Headlines screamed about a phantom climber haunting the mountain. Conspiracy theorists spun wild tales that Ritter had murdered Anna and Markus, that he hid their bodies, that he later died or vanished on purpose to escape justice. Meyer dismissed the ghost theory publicly, but privately, he wasn't so sure. When investigators searched Ritter's abandoned cabin in Zermatt, they found something disturbing. Old climbing maps with the Weisshorn marked repeatedly. Newspaper clippings about Anna and Markus's disappearance. And in the corner of the room, a half-burned rope. Despite the eerie discoveries, forensic testing offered no definitive proof tying Ritter to the crime. His DNA wasn't on the rope or the knife fragment. And there was one devastating fact Meyer couldn't ignore. If Ritter had killed them, why had he left their bodies perfectly preserved in the ice, rather than hiding them? By month 6 of the investigation, the case stalled. The media moved on. For Anna's parents, the silence was unbearable. "You opened this wound," her mother told Meyer. "Now close it. Tell us what happened." But Meyer had nothing. In September 2022, the investigation nearly collapsed. The prosecutor's office announced it was considering closing the case for lack of evidence. Meyer was furious. "We are one step away from finding the truth," he argued. "You cannot close this case now." But the truth was he had no new leads, until a climber came forward with something no one expected. A French alpinist named Julien Marchand claimed he had discovered a hidden campsite high on the Weisshorn, one that didn't match any official expedition logs. Julien brought photographs, a torn tent, decades old, rusted cooking gear, a single climbing boot, size 12, the same size as Ritter's. Investigators rushed to the site. First, it seemed promising, but when forensic teams analyzed the items, they made a crushing discovery. The campsite dated back to the 1980s, long before Anna, Markus, or Ritter ever climbed the Weisshorn. Another dead end. It was almost over, until one night, Meyer sat in his office staring at Anna's journal again. There was one phrase he couldn't shake. "We're not alone on this mountain." He had always assumed she meant Ritter or another climber, But then, an analyst re-examined the journal under ultraviolet light. Beneath the visible ink were faint impressions from a previous page. Words that had been written and torn out. They read, "He keeps watching us. Markus says I'm imagining it. But I know he's there." This was the breakthrough Meyer had been waiting for. With the journal entry in hand, Meyer pushed for one last expedition, this time with specialized drones and ground-penetrating radar. For weeks, the team combed the Weisshorn. Then, near a sheer ice wall just east of the summit, they found it, a narrow crevasse sealed for decades, and inside, something metallic glinting in the dark. When they pulled it out, they realized it was a piece of equipment, a climbing axe, and engraved on the handle were the initials HR, Hans Ritter. The ice wall groaned as rescue teams drilled deeper. The crevasse was treacherous, but what they found inside stopped every climber in their tracks. Two shapes. At first, they thought it was just debris, old climbing gear lost to time. But as they cleared the snow and ice, the outlines became unmistakable. Bodies. One was curled tightly, arms wrapped around a tattered rucksack. The other lay face down, ice-crusted hair frozen stiff like glass. They were not Anna or Markus. DNA testing would later confirm it. Hans Ritter. His body was frozen mid-motion, his face twisted in what could only be described as fear. Next to him, clutched in his frozen hand, was a torn scrap of fabric, the same material as Anna's climbing jacket. Forensic analysis reconstructed the scene. Ritter died roughly a year after Anna and Markus vanished. His climbing rope had snapped clean in two, consistent with a fall. But why was Anna's fabric in his grip? Detective Meyer stood over the frozen remains in disbelief. If Ritter didn't die until a year later, had he taken Anna and Markus? Or had he been hunting them, and the mountain claimed him instead? While forensic teams examined Ritter's corpse, another discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation. Inside Ritter's weatherproof jacket was a notebook, frozen, but intact. When thawed, its pages revealed chilling entries. Day 1. Spotted them at Greta's hut. They don't know I'm following. Day 3, Markus mocks me. Says I'm nothing but a ghost. He'll see. Day 6. The storm hit. They're trapped. I can hear Anna crying. Markus doesn't see me watching from the ridge. Day 8. No food. No shelter. I should help. I won't. They need to learn respect. Day 10, Markus fell. Anna, she begged me. I left her. And the final entry, written in shaking letters. I hear her in the wind. I see her in the ice. I can't sleep. The page trailed off. A week later, another avalanche revealed a second crevasse. Inside, frozen together as if locked in one final embrace, were Anna and Markus. Anna's face was peaceful. Markus's arm was draped around her shoulders. The forensic team concluded that after Ritter abandoned them, Anna and Markus likely succumbed to exposure. Their bodies had been preserved in the ice, just meters away from where Ritter later fell to his death. The mountain had kept them all. The discovery sent ripples through the climbing community. The media branded it the Alpine curse, but Meyer knew better. This wasn't a curse. It was one man's cruelty and a mountain's silence. Yet legally, Ritter would never face justice. For Anna's parents, it was a bitter victory. They finally had their daughter back. But no court trial, no confession, just frozen pages of a madman's journal, forever trapped in 20-year-old ink. At a quiet ceremony in Zermatt, Anna and Markus were laid to rest. Meyer stood in the back, snow falling softly around him. He thought of the first time he'd read Anna's words. We're not alone on this mountain. She had been right, and now, at last, she wasn't lost. Months later, Meyer received a call. A new avalanche, this time farther north on the Weisshorn, had exposed something else. Another frozen figure. At first, they thought it was another climber lost to history. But when Meyer arrived and brushed the ice away, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The body was Ritter's, except Ritter's corpse was still sealed in the morgue. This one was different. Another climber. Same era, same gear, and around his neck was a pendant. one engraved with 3 words, "We were followed." When Detective Meyer saw the pendant, his breath fogged in the icy air. The corpse was frozen mid-step, head bowed as if climbing against an eternal wind. Around his neck hung the engraved pendant. "We were followed. Not I. Not he. We." Forensic experts quickly dated the gear. Late 1980s, the same year Anna and Markus vanished. But this man wasn't Ritter. His ID tags revealed a name long erased from memory. Carl Voigt, an amateur climber who'd been reported missing weeks before Anna and Markus. He was supposed to have died in an avalanche. Now, 20 years later, his body was telling a very different story. The journal Ritter left behind had been shocking enough, but Voigt's corpse raised an even darker question. Was Ritter stalking multiple climbers before Anna and Markus? Meyer dug through old police files. 1984, 2 climbers vanish. No trace. 1986, solo hiker disappears. Presumed avalanche victim. 1987, Carl Voigt vanishes. Search suspended after 3 weeks. All had one thing in common. Their last known sighting was near Ritter's cabin. And every case had been written off as the mountain's cruelty. Until now, armed with Voigt's discovery, Meyer petitioned for a new search around Ritter's abandoned cabin. The hut was buried under decades of snow, but when rescue crews dug it out, they found more than an old shelter. Inside, for climbing ropes each frayed and cut, a collection of maps marked with red excess, and tucked inside a rusted tin box, photographs. Faded and water-damaged, but clear enough to recognize. Faces. Voigt, the 2 1984 climbers. Even Anna and Markus. Every picture was taken from a distance, like prey watched by a hunter. The case exploded across Europe. "The Alpine Stalker," headlines screamed, but without Ritter alive to answer for it, the truth remained maddeningly out of reach. Had he killed them, or had he simply followed and let the mountain finish what he started? For Anna's parents, it didn't matter. Their daughter had a story now, one the world could never forget. But Meyer couldn't let it go. Sitting in his office late one night, Meyer pinned photos to his board. Voigt's frozen body, Ritter's journal, the pendant. We were followed. Anna and Markus, locked in eternal embrace. He saw it then, not as a detective, but as a man who had stared into the heart of the Alps long enough to understand its silence. Ritter didn't just stalk them, he watched them die. And when his own time came, whether by accident or guilt, the mountain entombed him with his victims. A frozen court, a verdict sealed in ice. 20 years after their disappearance, Anna and Markus's story reshaped how the world viewed the Alps. Rescue protocols changed. New technology was deployed. Climbers were warned not only of avalanches, but of something far more unsettling. Sometimes, Meyer told a press conference, the mountain isn't the only thing watching you. And deep in the archives of the Swiss Federal Police, Ritter's journal sits locked away, unread, untouched, because some truths are better left buried. Years later, a new storm swept the Weisshorn. When it cleared, climbers found Ritter's cabin half exposed again. On its door, carved by wind and time, was a single word: waiting. No one knows who carved it, but every climber who passes that cabin now whispers the same thing. Anna, Markus, Carl Voigt, and Ritter, they're all still there, watching. There's a sound the Alps make at night. It isn't the wind. It isn't the cracking of distant ice. It's silence, the kind of silence that makes you feel watched. When search teams closed their case file on Anna and Markus, they left behind more than evidence. They left behind a story carved into the snow and written in frost. A story that, even now, refuses to melt. But then, something else happened. 2 winters later, a young alpinist named Leah Grunwald was scaling the same route where Anna and Markus had vanished. It was midnight, moonlight on snow, her headlamp beam cut through the dark like a knife. And that's when she saw it, the figure, standing at the ridge, too far to be clear, too still to be alive. When she called out, no answer. When she blinked, it was gone. Leah made it down alive, swearing she would never climb the Weisshorn again. Word spread among the climbing community. Some dismissed it as exhaustion-induced hallucination. Others whispered a different theory, that Ritter's ghost still roamed the Alps, not as a spirit of revenge, but as a sentinel, bound to the place where his obsession ended. And if Ritter's ghost walked the snow, so did Anna and Markus. In his final interview before retirement, Detective Meyer said something that sent a chill through every journalist in the room. The Alps don't forget. We just stop listening. He refused to clarify. When pressed, he pointed at Ritter's journal and simply said, "Read it backwards. You'll see." To this day, no one knows what he meant. The journal remains sealed. We can explain away the evidence. The avalanche, the journal, the pendant, the photographs. But there's one question that has no answer. If Ritter stalked those climbers, who stalked Ritter? Because on the very last page of his journal, written in a trembling hand, "I hear them behind me." Imagine it, a wide aerial shot of the Alps. White peaks like the spines of sleeping giants. Snow blowing in slow motion. And in the middle of that endless white wilderness, a cabin. Its door half buried, its roof caved in, and a single shadow moving inside. Not quite human, not quite gone. Fade to black. And now we turn to you. Do you think Ritter was a killer or a victim of something far worse? Was this a story of human obsession, or proof that there are places in this world where the rules change and the mountain decides who stays? Tell us what you believe in the comments. And remember, the next time you stand on a lonely ridge and hear nothing but silence, it might not be silence at all. Because in the Alps, the snow keeps secrets.